This is Duke University.
In my introduction to IBM, I mentioned how Sandy has been a great colleague and friend, and I have blue blood. It should be known. I was at IBM for 10 years. The reason we're here today, Cisco sponsored us being here, sponsored you all being here. So we've got a great relationship with Cisco. We're about to embark on a pretty robust research project that's funded with NSF. To look at the internal story. So I think we're going to hear a little bit more about the internal story, just as we did with David from Sheila, about this notion of the ROI of collaboration. So if I was to pull some threads together, Sandy said it, Michael said it, everybody's kind of said it, that there is value here. And the value is not how do you put value on the thing itself. The value is in how that thing accelerates the things you want to do anyway, whether that's tighten the relationship with customers, whether that's improve your cost structure, whatever it is, social just accelerates it. And that's the nature of technology in general. It doesn't have a consciousness, if you read Kevin Kelly's book, but it does like speed. So you just got to be careful what you speed up and which direction you set it in, because once you wind it up and off it goes, it'll just as easily set up a train wreck as it will a positive outcome. And there's a lot of complexity here. And if there's anyone I know who knows about the complexity and the challenges of dealing with bringing social media to an enterprise, it's Sheila. So here you go.
Thank you very much.
And I'll get a little clock set up for you right over here.
So just to, you guys still with us? It's a lot of material in a short amount of time, huh? I forgot what it was to feel like being back in school. So what was that? There's a lot to digest. So what we're going to do, just so you have a sense of what the next little time will be, is I'm going to spend about 20 to 25 minutes at a pretty fast pace to go through some slides. But then really I'm going to spend a lot of time on Q&A and really open it up for just interactive Q&A to get things going and get you guys thinking and just participating in collaboration. So what I'd like to start with, I'm going to spend a little bit about it from a Cisco perspective, but that we've recently had a lot of external speakers, speaking engagements where we talk to CIOs, and similar to a lot of things that Sandy said. And I have a provocative statement that I'm now asking these audiences, not in high tech, but I think collaboration is the next IT investment of the decade. Now, before you can agree or disagree with that, you need to understand what I mean by collaboration. And the way we're currently defining collaboration at Cisco is it's really in 4 key areas. It's unified communication and mobile, so all your mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, etc. It's that software that really helps the call center, so all that social mining you're doing at the call center and all those interactions that you're having with your customers. The third is really around what you're doing on telepresence and video. When we say telepresence at Cisco, we mean any and all video, whether it's these kind of units or show and share or video in your other applications. And then we have something called collaboration applications. So you'll hear me talk about Quad. It's our social solution. Instant messaging is our internal jabbers, our internal IM or chat. And then, of course, meetings and all the meetings and WebEx and all those kinds of meetings. That's all in the collaboration architecture. So when you put that together, it really is all those things together. That's what I say is collaboration. And given consumerization and given BYOD and given devices and social and everything we heard in the last 2 presentations, I still think that collaboration is the IT investment of the decade. But it just can't be the investment. It has to also have the return, which is what I'll spend a lot of time talking about. It has to also have the right architecture. I'm not going to drain technical architecture slides, but we can. But it all has to come together. And the only point I want to make here is I do agree with one of the speakers earlier that it started off, and I think every company, as best of breed technologies. PR wanted to go do something. AR wanted to do something. Marketing had another solution. And I firmly believe, and we share this story with a lot of customers, that the only way to really get that exponential value of collaboration is when you can take a holistic enterprise approach. Because if I don't, I really believe that collaboration has the ability to break down any and all barriers inside a company. Functional barriers, cultural barriers, geographical barriers, I don't like you barriers, and whatever kind of barriers that sit inside a company, yes, those exist, right? And it has the ability to break them all down, right? But you can't do that if every function or every group has picked its own siloed solution. What you've done is you've now allowed for siloed collaboration. And that's just not a value. What you want is a holistic enterprise approach. And then, of course, the other competing or compelling factor here is, boy, the business's requirements are changing. You know, the CEOs in our businesses and the marketing and the evangelists and all the business people want these things. I want that smartphone, and I want that, whatever I have from a consumer standpoint, I want that at work. I want that capability at work. I want to be able to have social aspects, and I want that Facebook-like application in the enterprise. I want virtual or video, I want virtualized applications, content, desktop. I want to make sure that I can think about all the virtualization, and I don't really want to carry around this 5-pound laptop anymore. And then finally, I really want video. Video, it's on YouTube, it's everywhere else. Why can't I have video in the enterprise? Why can't I send a message out to my team and do a lecture, do all the things we do in normal text communication on video? So the business requirements are changing. You got all the different tools and technology that are out there. So the IT professional sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, it really is quite compelling and quite an interesting time to be in IT. Because this was the PC world. It's a simple, easy stack of compute, and this is what IT professionals could implement. Microsoft base, Windows base, get a client, a server, and you're basically done in some devices. This is what the IT industry and the IT professionals are managing inside the enterprise. And you got to standardize on some things, you got to offer some things, you got to open it up, you got to allow for things, and that's the complexity that IT professionals in every industry, and as Sandy mentioned, we do speak, a lot of my members of my team are here from our RTP, from our North Carolina office, and many of us speak to a lot of customers over the course of the day of what we're doing here at Cisco. Make sense? Okay. I'm going to just keep asking, so just beware. So the other thing I think that's happening is it's so fascinating that all that's happening, but also I think there are 4 trends, because I really just get excited about I don't get excited about when it's something to do and it's kind of status quo or it's in the moment for the moment. What I get excited about, and I think there's energy and value, is when it's transformational. And I think there are 4 trends driving how work is going to be different in the future. The first is, of course, the technology trends. I could talk forever about all the technology. You guys could probably teach me a thing or two about technology, so I won't do that, but there's a lot of change happening in the technology space. From a business perspective, those demands are changing. I just showed you some, but also those global high-performing teams. It's expected in business to create global high-performing teams, just like that, make them successful and effective. Haven't met you before, but I got to do that and perform and then dissolve that team and move on. Content, this is one of my most favorite and exciting and daunting trend of all of them, is because the increase of content in the enterprise is only going to continue to increase. And guess what? That's great, that's wonderful. But IT's job has to be, with rules and business policies and everything else, is the ability to mask that complexity of that content to really serve up the right content to the right person at the right time during their workflow. Now that is incredibly easier said than done, but we got to understand this mass proliferation of content is only going to increase. And when I say content, I mean text, documents, papers, video, IMs. I mean, that's all considered content. So we got to figure out rules and triggers to be able to really manage that content better. And then finally, the last trend is mobility. And this is where I think our sales organization, to some degree, has redefined the word work, where work really isn't a noun or a place. We're not going to go to work anymore. It's a verb. I'm going to work wherever I am, and I'm going to work at home. I'm going to work in the soccer field. I'm going to work in the auditorium. I'm going to be able to do work wherever I am, and that is much more than just your email on your smartphone. It's accessing processes. It's accessing transactional systems. It's accessing the applications that you need to do. So this whole notion of just social, I agree with exactly what Sandy said. It just can't be social. It has to integrate with work and the ability to really move things along. So those are the 4 trends. And then at Cisco, we also think about, how do you think about an IT investment? Well, we have 3 basic categories you can spend dollars in IT, right? In any company, in any business, and all your use cases. You can spend it to run the business, keep the lights on, operational functionality, productivity. You can spend it on to delivering a new business capability. For us, I have 1,000 Telepresence deployed across Cisco globally, and that's a new experience and a new capability. Or I can spend my IT dollars on delivering growth for the company. Now, of course, IT loves to spend in the top 2 rungs, right? That's where we get excited, not necessarily in productivity and keeping the lights on and running. Sorry, that's something here. But Gartner and others resources will say that most enterprises, guess what? 65 to 75% of the IT spend in any large-scale enterprise company is in that bottom rung. Now that's boring, right? We want to be able to really shift that, and our aspirational goal at Cisco, we're not quite there yet, but our aspirational goal at Cisco is to get to a third. Now wouldn't it be exciting if 2/3 of your total spend available for you could help deliver new capabilities to the organization and spend IT dollars that really will help grow the company. And that's really why we get really excited about this notion in the space of communication and collaboration, and I'll show you in some examples how it really does play in kind of all three spaces. Where is the clock?
Right here.
You got it, okay, good. So what we did at Cisco is we were having all these things happen and all these best of breed tools pop up and all of a sudden, and then John Chambers said, well, we really need to come up with what we believe is our overarching strategy. We think it's important that we should potentially get into the business of collaboration, but we need a strategy. And this is perhaps one of the most important slides because this is our internal strategy, and if you ever come to work with Cisco, you'll see it. But we decided to call this that we want to deliver an integrated workforce experience. Now, I'm not in marketing, but it just happens to be, because we carefully chose those words, but it happens to be the acronym is we, and that's completely coincidental. I can't take credit for that. But really what we said is we want to make sure that the technology is integrated, of course, but process, workflow. Again, the value of what you can get from collaboration is when cross departments can talk to each other, finance and HR and marketing, and cross departments, so integration, content, data, functions talking together is really a key value. Workforce, because we said, it's great if we get our 65,000 employees talking to each other and collaborating and more efficient, but it's exponential value when it's our entire workforce. Employees, partners, customers, everyone in our ecosystem with whom we do business. Now, we're not quite there yet, but really we think this whole notion of collaboration inside and outside the firewall is going to be explosive and exponential. And then we said experience, because I'll say, and I don't want to insult anyone in the room, so I'll talk about it from an IT perspective, but typically IT, we deliver a project and we get excited, and then we go to the next one and we get excited and the next one, right? And often IT doesn't step back and say, have I effectively and holistically made your experience better or worse? When it all came together, did it all work or not work? And so what we wanted to do here is to make sure as we deliver the solution, it really does all come together and it's not these kind of one-off projects and programs. So we think by doing this, we really will deliver productivity, innovation, and growth. So it's interesting. So what happened is we said, okay, if that's the vision, really what is it? And again, we started this vision about 2.5 years ago, and we think it's very different than really anything else in the marketplace because it does these 4 things. The first is, of course, it's going to integrate what I call the communication and collaboration modalities. Unified communications, telepresence, video, instant messaging, all the ways that you guys just naturally chat and communicate and collaborate, but at work. The second is we looked and we said, what was happening from a social software, consumer social software perspective, and said, what's relevant inside the business? Now this might change every 6 months, but for now we said it really is wikis and blogs and instant messaging and forums. We're seeing that's a whole new way of communicating versus just email. And of course, in Jabber is our instant messaging solution. And then we call this notion, which I'll talk about, is communities. So think of a community as any work group. Functional, cross-functional, your project teams, your program team, anything you do to bring people together. It can be a staff meeting or it can be a cross-functional global team. And we think it's important that we allow these communities, which we now have 1,600 or so at Cisco, to really have a way that they can really communicate and collaborate. Now, we could have stopped here and we would have introduced what I would call the technology part of it, the new collaboration communication technology. But it would not have fulfilled our vision, which our vision was really where the elements of social networking meets work. People ask me all the time, do you allow Facebook and LinkedIn and all that inside the company? Yes, we do. But I'm not interested in collaborating for the sake of collaborating. I'm interested in using these tools and technologies to really make work more efficient and more productive. And that's why the next 2 components may not be exciting, but they're really, really important. The third is I will use this by offering what it's going to feel like a very personalized and relevant experience. My experience is very different than George's experience, than Tony's experience at work. And I want to make sure that I'm using search and tagging and identity management and all those things that's going to make that experience feel very personalized and relevant. And then finally, I'm not done until I can access, not change, but access all those transactional systems. Your HR systems, your finance systems, your apps, and I'll put it in your terminology. It's really an app store for the enterprise. That's what I want to access into this overall experience. So we were building this in IT, we're moving some traction, and it seemed to be a little bit differentiated. We're pulling the pieces together because there was some Cisco product, there was third-party product, and making some work. And then we talked to a lot of people, and John Chambers, like he talked to a lot, got a lot of input, and said, you know what? We're clearly number one in the unified communication space, but really we want to shift to collaboration. So the decision was made a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago, to productize this. And we actually have a product now that's called Cisco Quad, which I put it in the BUs hate it when I say this, so erase this part of the video, but it really is kind of like Facebook and YouTube, but for work. It's really got all those elements I just explained to you in the workplace that we've deployed. We deployed last November, so we're almost a year old. I have 83,000 unique visitors. We're seeing this, being rolled out into the organization. I will validate a lot of what Sandy and others have said, that it is a lot about adoption and usage, but you got to get those business processes and business value stories. And I can share with you during the Q&A a whole bunch of examples and case studies that I think might be helpful. And now I'm not going to show you the slide, but I will say just one statement on this. This is an enterprise architecture approach. Finance can't go pick what they want. HR can't go pick what they want. It's an enterprise architecture that we've laid out, and we make it relevant and feels custom to each function, but it's the same architecture because, again, I want those different functions and different groups talking to each other. So that's the integrated workforce experience. And that's social. So remember I said how social and mobile and virtual and video are all going to come together. That, as complex as that is, and a little bit overwhelming, is just the social piece. So then you layer on all the components of what's happening with mobile. We have in mobile and video. We have our business tablets coming up. We have smartphones. And I thought you guys would find this interesting. This is our landscape of our smartphones and phones and PC choices at Cisco. We're very bullish on the actual smartphone choices. We have several that we offer. We're up to 18,000 iPhones. 1,000 a month are being deployed, and that's pre-4GS, 4SG, the last one. Android's coming in. Of course, for the first time ever, we're seeing a decline in BlackBerry. We also have, and you guys, we have 12,000 Macs actually in the office these days, and that's growing as well. And then the tablets are coming on board. So what we offer at Cisco is we want to make sure that we are a BYOD, bring your own device, and we built the architecture, security, risk, and I'm not going to go through all those rules because I know I'll bore you to tears, but we make sure that we're protecting the company's assets, but we really do want to make sure that we are having a bring your own device policy because that's important. It's an important element of these 4 things that are happening. And I'm not going to drag these slides. So if that's social, and then we had mobile, the other thing that's happening, which I get the most excited about, oh, I went too fast, is around virtual. So think in this space, think in this space, I mean, there's so many transactional systems and so many things you have to do at work. Your time card, your vacation time, your expenses, things you have to approve, all the things are in those, Salesforce.com, all these systems and applications, and each one is very, very different. So what I think we should be doing is literally having the notion of an enterprise app store. So just like your iPhone, you have all those apps, you can pick and choose which ones you want to download. I think we should have an app store that you can access and you can choose what apps you want to put where. If someone want to go onto the Quad platform, if someone wants your device, how you want to show up, you can have almost a customized experience based upon what experience you want by device. So we're beginning this. We launched Quad again last November. We have about 100, George, 100 apps or so roughly? Yeah. About 100 apps deployed on our Quad platform, and that ranges from everything from learning and development, training, filling out your vacation time, my expenses, filling out your expense report. We have 100 different apps at the organization. Now what's happening, and I'll show you in a second, they're actually, it's a layer that sits on top of the transactional system. So you're in there and it's really easy, but at some point the end user has no idea they went into deep Oracle or deep transactional system. So the App Store really does, and back to everyone's point, it really brings that stickiness, that adoption when I can actually have the social components of the phone and IM and communities, but actually do work and get access to work really easy and fast and almost customize the work aspect. So I want to show you, here's some fun facts about how many we've deployed and some examples. But I want to drill down on this one because I think it's hilarious. So our HR IT organization looked at all the apps we have in the company. And this was just a funny study. And we looked at all the different transactional systems, all the finance systems, everything you can imagine in a company, and we said, what app is the most used inside the organization? Any guesses? Huh? No, because that was more of a content, so we didn't include email, maybe, but we just didn't include email in that discussion. Like HR systems, finance systems. Yeah, well, that's expense reports, timesheets. That's what I thought. Expense timesheets. No, it was our PTO app, which is paid time off, vacation app. And I honestly think people went to see their vacation time because I think if they kept clicking it, they would get more vacation. I think that was the mindset. I can't prove that though. I can't prove that. So anyway, just real quick, I just want to show you this one, and then we can open it for Q&A. But this is what we've done. This is the Quad My View page. At the very top, you see the PTO app. You show how many hours you have left, what you want to do now. Let me just explain how painful this was before. It was 14 steps if you found the link in our HRMS system. Literally 14 steps. And then the second or third step, it would ask you, for what pay period ending do you want to take vacation time? Not Friday, not Monday, not a calendar. You had to go now look at a payroll calendar and say what pay period ending. And this is kind of designed by some of these large transactional systems. So we took the app. You can drag and drop whatever apps you want. And this is the second page. It shows a calendar. You click on the different app. You click on the days you want. I'm on click 2. You hit submit on the bottom. This is now Oracle. You have no idea you're now in the Oracle system. You put in your 8 hours that you want for each and every day. You're back out of Oracle. You hit submit in 4 steps. You've submitted your PTO and you get a message back when it's been approved. Now that's a very simple rudimentary example, but we're doing that in spades. Again, we have 100 already done and we have a whole timeline to do a whole bunch more apps as we roll this out. And it really is an example to bring the communication, collaboration, personalization, and applications together. So with that, I'll stop and we'll open it up for Q&A.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we're reversing roles here because last year I guess I got to come down to, where were we?
Summit.
The summit.
Yeah, our collaboration
Was it
summit.
Colorado? I don't remember.
Where were we last year?
It was pretty.
Gosh.
I think you're going to get a new mic. I think you wore out the battery on the other one.
Okay.
So I got to admit, when I saw the charts, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
how are we going to get through them in 20 minutes? But you came in with 5 minutes left to go, so congratulations, congratulations. It struck me when you were talking, right, and you saw those gnarly architecture diagrams. You know, we had to set you up to say this stuff is really complex, and if you're in an organization. And I'm thinking about Apple, right? To be insanely great and very simple and intuitive to use, you have to put all the gnarly stuff in the back end, which is what you're saying. Mm-hmm. So I just want to test. You're not saying we're the IT police. You're saying we have to have a kind of IT fabric that then can allow the kind of consumer and easy, simple layer on top of it. But if we don't do that and enforce to a certain extent, what we're going to end up with is silos of IT that can't necessarily be integrated. And IBM, where I used to work, used to love that because then we could write a whole bunch of middleware between app A and app B, right? But then it was only for those two, and it wasn't across the whole. So is that the right way for me to understand what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. The other thing I would say is that while I necessarily don't like to use the analogy of Facebook and YouTube because work is much more complicated than pictures and status. I mean, we know that, right? But that's what Facebook is pictures and status, and everyone wants that experience. Well, so what we've done is we've tried to emulate that, but the point is that there's complexities in work, approval, sign-on, process, identity, who are you, what are you allowed to see, and all that's being done at the architecture or the data layer. So really the end user is trying to make it as simple and as intuitive. And you're absolutely right, to do that it's hard to make it simple and intuitive, because the existing old legacy systems are built to make it really complicated and complex in all those process steps.
So it's also interesting, because I know Tom, and I saw all those devices across the top, and you see the rise of the Mac, and if I get this right, if I get the story right, the decision, okay, we're going to do the Mac, and we can negotiate the price with Apple, and we can get you a good price. But in terms of how to figure out how to use it, we're going to crowdsource that. We're not going to have a big old call center, but it's people helping people. So there's a peer-to-peer component to, if you want that device, that's fine. But we're going to crowdsource the kind of support around it rather than kind of do it in the traditional way.
That's exactly what happened. We had 2,300 Macs within Cisco that before IT decided to support Macs, because we can. So we then learned, and what the Mac users did is they built at that point a wiki, and it was self-support wiki, whereas the Mac users were coming in, how do you do VPN, how do you access, I mean, they would help each other. And we learned from an IT perspective, gosh, what a great support model. It reduces the calls, it reduces all the support calls coming in. And now we have our mobility community, now we have communities, but the notion of the self-support communities, that instead of having all these agents take calls, the community is helping each other. And they're happier, the satisfaction is up, costs are down. I mean, the metrics are all going in the right direction.
So on the back end, you're saying we need the architecture, we need the fabric, we need to define it. You then open it up to a certain extent to say BYOD.
Yes.
I mean, who shouldn't have a BYOD policy? You know, being Irish, that's very close to another BYO that I personally I'm pretty tightly gravitate towards, particularly at this point of the day. And so, but it's simple to say BYOD.
Yeah,
and it
very
makes
simple.
complete sense to any of us. And if we sit out there where you say, in the world of Twitter and such, oh, it's just about my update status and you know, how I proffer my identity out there. When it's no joke when you have to take that same desire for simplicity and access into the enterprise.
And then it's security, and then it's risk.
Yeah.
And let's say now it's your device, and you leave the company on a bad perspective. I want to wipe your device.
Right.
You don't want me to wipe your device. You've now got personal and pictures, and so there's so much policy and security that you have to think through when you're deploying that. In fact, again, I talk to a lot of customers, and that's the part they go back to. They haven't quite implemented it as extensively as Cisco has, most companies, just because of the security and risk aspect of that. So you got to really wrap around policy as well, because now you're allowing all these devices, unknown, unprotected, potentially unsecured, on your network. So
we're good friends, right?
yeah.
Is it worth it? I mean, this has got to be one of the hardest IT jobs on the planet. What you're doing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we talk.
We have a lot of bosses.
Yeah, you have a lot. Exactly right. And you have demanding bosses who are kind of almost demanding consumer web, you know, kind of offerings, so to speak. But the challenges that you just exposed to this group are really daunting and much more complex.
Yeah.
So you're a year into Quad, right, which is essentially the unifying construct that brings everything together. You're making the argument that this kind of collaboration 2.0, whatever we want to call it, is the investment of the decade. So you're a year or two in. What are you feeling? I mean, are you still climbing up the steep hill and having faith? Are you taking encouragement from certain kind of moments of light, like the app? What's keeping you going?
So I would say a couple things. On the BYOD device as it relates to smartphones, we simply had no choice. I mean, the expectation of the consumers coming in and wanting their iPhone and wanting their BlackBerries and wanting their Android, that was a decision our CIO, Rebecca Jacoby, had made when she first kind of took over, is we're going to figure out how we allow for any device. Cisco has a lot of technology that has a lot of security aspects, so that was a big decision. Where we are right now, though, is it's been so successful. We have policy that we don't provide any phones for anyone. Every level of the company buys their phone as many times a year as they want to, based upon those 5 or 6 categories. The company policy will decide, your manager will decide if we should be on the company policy or your own personal one. Your manager decides that. But everybody owns their own phone. And even though it's more cost to the individual employee, they go buy their own phone as many times. And we have some people at work, as you can imagine, engineers, they want 5 phones a month. They like to change the new tinkering, the new tools. So we got out of that business. We said, fine, here are the rules and the policy. And so I would say that the cost went down and the satisfaction of our employee base went up. So it's been so successful, and now with virtualization coming, we're asking ourselves, and a study's going on, should we do the same thing with BYOD as it relates to laptops? Now, that's different. You use the laptops very differently than your smartphones. Compute, there's some jobs that make sense.
What if it goes in the cloud?
Yeah, that's what I mean with virtualization and content and all that. Does it become just this kind of dumb device again?
Yeah.
So we're looking at the economics. We're trying to make that decision, looking at the math and who. I think that's more of a segment of the population first, and we'll roll that out. But the other device has been so successful that almost like, why wouldn't you?
Right.
Now, as far as Quad, I will say that back to everyone's point, we talk about Quad, Quad, is the technology. Integrated Workforce Experience is the overall program. And the reason we distinguish that is because it's process, culture, technology that comes together. Just like as Sandy had mentioned, it really is process and technology, process and culture. So I would say that what I've found in most companies, they're usually good at 2 things, 2 of the 3 they're really good at. And at Cisco, we have a great culture and we have great technology. What we need to learn and get better at is process. And so I would say that those areas that have defined their process, here's my end goal, here's the business value I want. You know, we created one community that's all about selling competitively. So we took all these sources around the whole company, marketing, engineering, sales, and said everything about selling competitively, real-time information is now in one community. You access it. I mean, they're just like, I mean, seeing the benefit of that in spades, because that information is real time. It's not repeated across the organization 1,000 times. There are others that said, I think I want a community. That sounds fun. It's like the new buzzword today.
Yeah.
And
I want one of those.
I want one of those.
Yeah.
And who haven't thought that the business process, and they just don't work. So it really is, there's a whole lot that has to be planning about what business problem am I trying to solve, what's the expected value from that, and then just keep tweaking the process piece of it. Mm-hmm. So I would say where we are is, even though we've deployed, it is about a third of the organization that's using it quite extensively, a third that's dabbling, and a third that hasn't quite found it yet. Now,
and you think that if you were to look across this is part of what we'll be studying, so I'm kind of probing a little on that. One of your hypotheses on that is that the folks who say, I like that word community, let me have one of those, absent of what am I trying to accomplish or achieve, and what processes do I need to put in place to tune or tweak Quad plus the apps on top in order for that to serve that purpose. That's so. I pushed on this twice earlier. I asked the question of David and Alan about role, and then Sandy brought it up with the McKinsey study saying, if the internet kicked out this many kind of jobs or roles, the social is going to kick out whatever, 5 times more, 20 times more. Are you on the people side now, not the process of technology, are you seeing the culture side, but people component of it, are you seeing new roles as you're rolling out Quad and there's technology there and I can download it onto my BYOD device, for instance, that there's still somebody like a tuner who needs to kind of tune the technology to the particular need of the community. You've got councils all the way up at the top, which the collaboration councils yours, all the way down to the engineers who want to look at Siri on the iPhone 4S, right? How does that? What's the first step? Could you take me to? Do you go to somebody and say I want to do it?
Well, actually, we used to have a process about creating a community, and as we roll, and this was one of those things. This is a great story. So at the first, because the technology couldn't accommodate it, we had a process in place that basically you said, I want a community, and it would be like maybe I think it was 10 days or so before we provisioned the community, which was such a long time. But it was 10 days. And actually, we learned a lot about that because it did ask the question, and we had the process in place to say, what do you want it for? What are you trying to accomplish? And we've got actually 4 or 5 different types of communities, whether it's an open, restricted, private. So they're broken down and segmented into a couple categories. So it really forced the process. But at Cisco, they learned quickly that process is too laborious. We want to be able to click to create a community. And that features and functionality is coming in our next big release, which is December 5th. And now I'm so happy, actually, in hindsight, this was a great learning. We didn't necessarily plan it this way, but in hindsight, it's great that it's now because the organization has thought through a year or so about really what is a community and the process of it, and the ones that are, we've got all sorts of examples of which ones are successful and which ones aren't, versus if we had open a community day one, would have a lot of content to clean up right now.
If you look at those success stories, and you have such a rich experience, and one we're going to mine in great detail because there's 2 questions I want to ask. One is, when I talk to a lot of folks who are wanting to do this at the enterprise level, it's this idea of the network effect. One fax machine is worth nothing, so we've got to turn it on for everyone at the same time because you'll get the network effect. Now what you just said and what I hear a lot is when we turn it on for everyone, it's kind of like a third, which goes back to the 15% on the trust network on the inverse side. So if you want to move from a third to 2/3, so to speak, and you've said we've figured out some of the things that's the special sauce on the 1/3, what would be the 2 or 3 things that you've observed in this past year that could help you get the next third?
It's really one. It's business process and applications.
Back to the 2 you
those
just talked
apps.
about.
Getting more and more of those apps that I can actually do, and it's what I call a surprise and delight experience versus a painful one. And the only place you can have that, so it will help drive that adoption and stickiness, is in this integrated workforce experience. And then again, making sure the business is really defining what process are we trying to solve. I think it's fascinating. I think most people know that we went through a pretty tough summer. We had a pretty big work reduction going on, and we cut some labor out. And so now we have this whole team in community working on how we're accelerating Cisco's transformation. Now, to me, that's just such a perfect example of how to use all this technology. You've got senior leaders of the company trying to drive accelerated Cisco transformation. It's in 3 kind of categories: on our go-to-market, on our product, and just operational excellence. So you've got 3 tracks, 3 communities that are focused on it, but can all roll up to the overall bigger accelerated Cisco's transformation. Now they can do all this and have their roadmaps and communication and content and all the things they're deciding, but also that's available for the entire organization to see.
Right.
Now, from a fully transparency perspective, to see what's happening around this the act, and you can have filters and restricted, but it's driving transformation for the company that you never would have been able to do before. So that's, again, it's another example of how this really does help those big problems.
Which comes back to the power of the platform. So the idea of gamification.
Yeah.
I think you could gamify this, and you could even make people
Yeah,
who could
I wrote a
trade
note down,
PTO,
gamification.
right?
I did write a note around
Trade
that.
your PTO.
I wrote a big note because we haven't done a lot with gamification, so I wrote a big note.
Well, there's a conference next year, Sandy told me.
Okay, I
so
just heard about that.
we'll have you back.
Questions?
Questions? Jennifer?
I have a question about the telepresence. What kind of training do you give people to make them come across as professional when they're dealing with clients or even internally when they're using the telepresence?
Let me just repeat the question because we are taping this. So telepresence has its own set of etiquette, and Sandy, you can tell, does this type of stuff all the time, and she kept me going. She also knows me. I've got ADD. I'll float off. So she said, go to page 8, Tony. But it was seamless. That's a learned thing. So maybe even extend that beyond. Just there's telepresence, but there's social presence in IE and all that.
Yes. So I would say no, we don't have formal training on telepresence. What we did is internally is you just start using it, and you really kind of learn that etiquette. And I'll never forget, when we first started our communication collaboration board, this whole team that puts this together, we would have all in-person meetings and then rotate. The next meeting would be completely virtual, because we had to understand what that virtual experience was, and interrupting and jumping in, or you IMing while you're having a conversation. I mean, all that, you got to just kind of figure that out. But telepresence, the big meetings and the customer meetings for sure, we make sure that people are prepared for that and all that. But what we've done is video is enabled in every meeting we do. I have a strategy that says I want to offer every employee of the company pervasive video. That doesn't mean they get a telepresence unit. That means they might get a Movi camera on their laptop, they get WebEx Connect, they get whatever we've got, but we enforce or encourage to say, turn your video on. And what that's done, it's amazing, we think. We're trying to prove the math of how it's reduced multitasking. People pay attention because they're on the video, you can see them. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we really believe that our meetings, you guys can vouch for it, have become shorter, more efficient. People are watching each other, and we really do say, look, you're in the meeting, be in the meeting.
Be here now.
Be here now.
So when we were together last, it was like, I think you had a great line, which was kind of video is the new voice.
Yes.
And as I'm looking at some of the data that's coming out in the public domain about Cisco, it's true that there's a lot more. John obviously does a lot of these video messages, but now as you push that technology, I'm not talking about telepresence and all that stuff, but I'm just talking in general, video becomes more pervasive, and you can put analytics around it. But people are sharing more even through, instead of doing an email, there might be video,
everything.
right?
Honestly,
it's really picking up.
In this presentation, which you can have access to, there's 7 use cases that it is your executive messaging, but it's product training.
Right.
It's HR training. It's having when we do our annual CPC goals, performance goals, instead of me sending a note to say, here's why I picked the goals I did, I do a 2-minute video to my entire team. While they're putting in their goals, they can see me understanding, saying why I picked the ones I did. I mean, it really is and we do 120 million minutes of video a month at Cisco.
And you push that through show and share,
All
and
that.
you can search it.
Search it, text, translation. We can do translation from video to English text. You can search the text. You can search a video. I want to see every time Tony said the word collaboration in this video, and it can go to that.
Right. We're working on that for our lectures because they want to blow right through me to the part where it says assignment, which is totally fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you had it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Cisco is different from a lot of other enterprises we're familiar with. And what you're seeing in some of these other enterprises is a lot of app proliferation, business units subscribing to a service, doing pretty much their own thing, or just being frustrated with central IT because IT has not been responsive.
I have some of that.
Yeah, what would you say to those companies about this vision, this environment that you've got, and how is it possible, really?
Let me paraphrase just for the video, because I think this is a very germane question. So you got all the toys, right? If you've got another company that's not in the same business, you could argue IBM may have a similar kind of base capability set. So if I'm on the outside looking in at this and say, I want to have me some of that, I may not have the IT shop that even begins to have the capability. How does all that work itself out in the larger context?
Right.
Yeah?
So I can tell you that, I can't tell you all who, but I can tell you that we're announcing next week that we've sold 1 million seats of Quad to different various companies. So it is resonating. And the one company I can tell you officially that's public is Nike. And Nike, in my mind, is a great company because it's a supply chain in manufacturing, and they really wanted to come in and reduce cost and connect their supply chains together and connect that with the policies and procedures inside the company. They had Jive, they had all these other competitors, best of breed. But what they saw they could do here is really bring corporate to their suppliers, to the global connection, and really drive this in a way that they needed to really see that benefit from a manufacturing standpoint. And I mean, I could give you, again, a whole lot of examples. I think what I've seen is the company has to be serious about taking an enterprise approach. End of day. They got to feel the pain that they've got wikis and blogs and this and that, and they just got to feel like, oh my God, it's out of control. Now the CEO can decide that, the CMO can decide that, the CIO can decide that, but they got to get to a point that they got to get some control around it.
But if I also read you right, though, the control might be the pain point that brings them to it, but actually having the IT fabric undergirding it, which is what Alan alluded to earlier when he put Quad over on the left, is that it comes at it from a network-based paradigm to begin with, right? So, oh, there's 1 million things all over the place. That's a problem. But now you're doing it in an integrated way.
So we're not saying, oh, that's not bad, and that's the power of, I think, what they've done here is, you know, again, working in IT for an IT company, I'm their most vocal and loudest customer. And I says, listen, I don't want that. What you can do in IT, we hate the cost of integration, and we hate when things don't interoperate. So if anything else, make this in an integrated solution that's easy to deploy. And oh, by the way, I've invested in Documentum as my content management system, and I've invested in Salesforce, and I've invested. Don't come in and tell me to rip that out. It has to interoperate with that. And that's been a really big tenet where it will sit inside the complex enterprises.
In the back, Andrea.
I work here at Duke, and I know that we have some version of Quad right now, and it's like both Meredith and I have used it because we think there's value in being able to share information about our alumni success stories, because everybody has their stories about oh, this alum like changed careers and changed industries, but everybody has their own stories, but nobody knows other people's stories. So we think there's power in that, and I don't see the uptake yet in it, and I know that changing the behavior is very hard. And I'm very interested in like the apps part of it, because if I think of all the systems I need to log into or all the things that I need to do stuff in, I understand that the Quad part is going to be something that you're selling. Are the apps, because I mean you would develop apps for your own internal system and the apps that you have, but are those going to be? Market.
Well, okay, so I can tell you Sheila's hypothesis. Okay, so this isn't a company stated. This isn't a company stated direction. No, this isn't a company stated direction. I am really bullish on the apps, and I've talked to our BU, and I think because I see the huge value in that. Most of the customers we talk to, they see Quad, and they're like, well, can we buy the apps you've done already? Can we have those as services? And right now we're packaging them as the SDK and how you develop them. We're giving them away with the purchase of Quad. But I think it's bigger than that, because I'm going to have my app store in Quad, and I'm going to have my apps on my tablet, and I'm going to have my apps on my iPhone. I'm going to have all these apps everywhere, and that is a proliferation that's happening right now. So my idea is I think enterprise IT will want an enterprise app store. Think of a container. And I can organize them by my personal apps, my business apps, my third-party apps. I might want Facebook, LinkedIn. I want an app store with any technology, Android, iOS, whatever you want in there. And then I can take those apps and put them and place them wherever I want. So my experience on the device, the PC, the tablet, the laptop is all different. So it's interesting because right now at Cisco we have all the pieces of the technology to do that. We have App HQ, which is the front end. We have NewScale, which is the provisioning and the security of each app, and then Tidal does a whole lot of work with the infrastructure. So there's products through acquisitions that we own, but we have not made an official decision. A lot of interest, a lot of discussion, but we have not made an official decision to say, yes, we're going to put that together and productize it. But I think we should.
So consumer web, this whole notion of the consumer web moving into the enterprise, the paradoxical thing here is you got to have an enterprise-grade infrastructure upon which to run that. Now, clearly we'll be going to go into virtualize and all that stuff, and we can get into that later. But for us as consumers, it's like, well, why can't I have Twitter inside my financial service institution. We ain't talking about that. I mean, we are, to a certain extent. That's the initial conversationing or the opening volley. But if you're going to do this seriously and you're going to get to leverage and scale and move your 1/3 down from productivity up into the other 2/3 from an investment perspective, it necessitates not an insignificant investment in a leader like Sheila, who's willing to really take that step forward as an IT leader and say, we ought to allow BYOX in whatever shape or form.
It is around policy. You got to make those steps and take those risks. I mean, it really is. They're all defined risk, but there's a whole lot of risk associated with it.
All right, we're going to take a break. You got to come back because now we've kind of given all the different pieces and parts, and we've got two very powerful stories of what does it actually look like when you put it all together. Okay? So it's going to be a fun-filled closure where we get synthesis of all the discrete parts. So if you're confused now, that's okay. Come back and it'll become clearer. We'll see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you so much to Sheila.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.